The Lord of the Rings films are undoubtedly my all-time favorite movies. I grew up watching them as often as I could because I was so fascinated by this universe. But of course, these films would never have come to life without the monumental work of J.R.R. Tolkien, who spent most of his life creating such a rich and detailed world. Tolkien was a professor at Oxford, and he was passionate about languages and myths, which led him to invent entire languages, maps, and a deeply complex story to bring Middle-earth to life. This colossal work served as the foundation for the films, which went on to become one of the greatest cinematic productions of all time. Directed by Peter Jackson in New Zealand, the 3 films were shot all at once over a period of 15 months, from 1999 to 2000, with a total budget of $280 million. With Peter Jackson's vision, the breathtaking landscapes of New Zealand, the talent of Weta Studios, and the thousands of people who worked on these films, along with the masterful music by Howard Shore, it could only result in a masterpiece. The films were released between 2001 and 2003 and not only captivated millions of viewers, but also grossed over $3 billion at the worldwide box office. The trilogy was a massive success at the Oscars as well, winning a total of 17 statuettes, including 11 for The Return of the King. New Zealand is a country located in the South Pacific Ocean. It consists of 2 main islands known as the North Island and the South Island. With a population of around 5 million people, it's a country renowned for its stunning landscapes, from towering mountains to vast green plains, as well as its rich cultural and natural heritage. Summer in New Zealand runs from December to February, making it an ideal destination to escape the winters of the Northern Hemisphere. I've always dreamed of discovering New Zealand to explore all the locations that brought these marvelous movies to life. So I decided to move there for a year and embark on a journey through Middle-earth. This video is the first of 3 videos dedicated to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, covering over 100 scenes and locations, and the first of many other videos on Middle-earth, like the Hobbit movies. So make sure you subscribe right now so you don't miss an upload. To make sure I am as comprehensive as possible in these videos, and to give you a complete guide to Middle-earth, I will cover some well-known filming locations as well as some lesser-known ones. For these, I mostly used Google Earth and spent way too much time on it while watching the films, trying to find matching landscapes that I hadn't seen anyone talking about. Let's start with this video where I will cover every location I found for the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring. The film begins with a prologue narrated by Galadriel, which tells the story of the Rings of Power and the war fought by the last alliance of elves and men against Sauron in Mordor. The battle scenes were filmed in central North Island on the slopes of Mount Ruapehu near the village of Iwako. This location is part of Tongariro National Park, one of New Zealand's most iconic tourist destinations. After parking, look at this mountain. It's where the first scene with the archers was filmed. Many close combat scenes were also shot in this parking lot, and you can clearly see the same mountain in the background. Additionally, blue screens were used for some of the shots, and CGI was employed for the wide-angle scenes. The next filming location is a few hundred meters from here. After parking here for the first location, continue a bit further to park here. Then, walk to this point and walk down in front of these mountains. This is where the scene where Gil-Galad kills an orc with his spear was filmed. Back in the prologue, Isildur defeats Sauron and picks up the One Ring. Refusing to destroy it, he keeps it, which leads us to the next scene where he is ambushed by orcs in the forest. This scene was filmed on the South Island, specifically in Arrowtown. Park here, then walk down the slope. This is where the scene was filmed. On location, a few trees from the film are still recognizable, although many have disappeared over time, with some having been cut down or uprooted. The following scene shows Isildur's death as the ring slips from his fingers. There was indeed a river nearby, but it wasn't deep enough for the scene to be filmed here. It was likely shot in another river or in a studio. Now, let's head to another filming location, and not just any location, it's Hobbiton. After the prologue, Gandalf arrives in the Shire for Bilbo's birthday, and we see for the first time those iconic green hills that we all know. Hobbiton is located on the North Island in the town of Matamata. Access to Hobbiton is only possible through the Shire's Rest, where you can find a large shop as well as a cafe to explore while waiting for your guided tour, which departs by bus. The Hobbiton set is nestled on a 5-hectare plot of the Alexander family's sheep and cattle farm. This location was used for both The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. For the filming of the first trilogy, 39 Hobbit holes were built in 1999 using untreated wood and polystyrene intended to be removed after filming. Of course, these Hobbit holes were empty, merely facades. After the film's success, the Alexander family realized that fans had a great interest in visiting this iconic filming location. Thus, in 2010, 44 Hobbit hole facades were built from permanent materials for the filming of The Hobbit. These are the sets we visit today. During my stay in New Zealand, I had the chance to visit Hobbiton 3 times. The first time, I took part in the second breakfast tour, a guided tour followed by a very hearty breakfast. Hobbiton offers several types of tours. Here's an overview of the different options. Having done both the second breakfast and the evening banquet, I can highly recommend them. I did the second breakfast tour privately, as my job as a photographer allowed me to take photos for Hobbiton. This gave me the opportunity to enjoy a private tour with a guide early in the morning before any other tours began. The morning light was stunning, perfect for capturing photos and videos. It really added to the immersion into the Shire. It was fantastic. When you step into Hobbiton, you instantly forget you're on a film set. Everything is impeccably maintained, and the attention to detail is amazing, thanks to the dedicated decorators and gardeners always on site. The smoke rising from the chimneys creates the illusion of life inside the Hobbit holes. Everywhere you look, there's nothing on the horizon to disrupt the feeling of being in Middle-earth, with no roads or modern structures in sight. After passing by some Hobbit's holes, we get to Bag End, the home of Bilbo and Frodo Baggins, and the largest, most iconic Hobbit hole in Hobbiton. Like the rest of the set, Bag End was only used for exterior shots, with interior scenes filmed in a studio. The oak tree above Bag End is artificial, made for the Hobbit trilogy using steel, expanding foam, fiberglass, and silicone. I had the chance to go inside for photos, but there isn't much besides a few set pieces to create the illusion of hallways for the scenes where Bilbo or Frodo enter, filmed from the outside. Then we move on to a well-known location, the Party Field, where Bilbo celebrates his 11th birthday. The daytime scenes showing the hobbits preparing for the party were filmed here, while the evening party scenes were shot in a studio. After that, we pass by Sam's house and his iconic yellow door, which is memorable as it is featured in the final scene of The Return of the King. Just next to Sam's house, you'll find 2 fully furnished Hobbit holes that you can explore. These 2 Hobbit holes are nearly identical, with only a few small differences, as you'll only be able to visit one of them. During the tour, the group is split in 2, so that everyone has more space to walk around inside and take photos comfortably. Inside, you can sit at the table or lie down in bed, and the cozy atmosphere will make you want to settle in and stay forever. Through the window, you can catch a glimpse of the Green Dragon in the distance. Once again, the attention to detail is remarkable. There is everything you can expect to find in a Hobbit hole, like good food, a warm hearth, all the comforts of home, and much more. We are now heading towards the mill and the Green Dragon. It is inside this mill that breakfast is served during the second breakfast tour. But first, let's visit the Green Dragon. The Green Dragon Inn appears several times in the movies, but for both shoots, it was only an exterior set. All the interior scenes of The Lord of the Rings were filmed in Wellington. It wasn't until the end of 2012 that the inn was rebuilt and expanded, with an interior fully themed to resemble what we see in the movies as closely as possible. The atmosphere is very cozy, and during your tour, you can enjoy a drink at the bar. I took advantage of being alone to snap a few photos. Soon after, the first group of the day arrived behind us, so I joined them at the mill to enjoy the second breakfast. Everything was absolutely delicious. A few months later, I returned to Hobbiton, this time to experience the evening banquet tour. This tour is truly exceptional because, being the last one of the day, the guides take their time at each stop, allowing you to fully enjoy the sights and giving you more time to take photos than on a standard tour. During this experience, you'll spend the evening at the Green Dragon Inn, and after an absolutely delicious meal, as night falls, you'll have the opportunity to stroll through Hobbiton under a starry sky. It's a unique and truly magical experience. I must admit, by the end, it's hard to hold back tears because the emotion is so powerful. A little while later, I returned to Hobbiton once again. This time, not for a simple visit, but to take part in the Hobbiton Halfling Marathon. Despite the rain, it was fantastic, with many participants dressed up in costumes. The half marathon takes place once a year, around the end of March. You can choose between a half marathon or the 11th run, an 11 km race. You can do both either running or walking. I paid 249 New Zealand dollars for the half marathon, which includes race photos, a medal, and a commemorative beer stein. After a first visit to Hobbiton, we ventured beyond the village, discovering the stunning landscapes of the Shire. We walked through cornfields, just like in the first movie, and climbed several hills before returning to Hobbiton. I even found a filming location from The Return of the King. Subscribe if you want to see it in the upcoming video dedicated to the third film. 1 kilometer before the finish line, you can stop for a drink at the Green Dragon and soak in a bit more of Hobbiton before leaving the village for good and heading toward the finish line. It was an incredible experience, and the next time I return to New Zealand, I hope I get the chance to do it again. Before moving on to the next location, I wanted to share an amazing Airbnb with you. If you're visiting New Zealand and looking for a place to stay near Hobbiton, this one is perfect. Waking up in the morning feels just like being in the Shire. I'll leave the link in the description in case you're interested. After Bilbo's party, Gandalf travels to Minas Tirith to consult the archives in search of answers about Bilbo's ring. In one scene, we see him arriving on a small hill bordered by a lake, gazing at the mountains rising behind Minas Tirith. This scene was filmed on the South Island near Queenstown. Access to this mountain requires an entry fee as it is located on private land. If you plan to visit, make sure to book in advance through the official site, as it's the only way to enter. Several other scenes from the second film were also shot here, but I'll discuss them in more detail in the second video dedicated to the two towers. In this scene, the image was reversed for the movie, and CGI was used to add the mountains and Minas Tirith. If I reverse my shot, you'll easily recognize the rocks on the ground and the smooth part of the mountain. The next two shots feature a close-up of Gandalf and another of the mountains with Mordor looming in the background. For both scenes, Peter Jackson used the same mountain range, known as the Remarkables. To capture this view, you can stay in the same spot used for Gandalf's arrival on horseback. In the close-up of Gandalf, the Remarkables are clearly visible in the background. A slight zoom right here will help you recognize them. For the wider shot, they used almost the entire mountain range, subtly altering it by blending some peaks and duplicating others. After finding the information he needed, Gandalf returns to Hobbiton to inform Frodo about the One Ring and instructs him to go to Bree. Before joining Frodo there, Gandalf must first visit Isengard to seek counsel from Saruman. Our next scenes, filmed in various locations across New Zealand, take place in Isengard. Let's start with the scene where Gandalf arrives at Saruman's tower. This scene was filmed on the North Island at Harcourt Park. Once you're here, take a look at this tree. This is where the scene of Gandalf arriving was filmed. The shot was reversed and the bridge was added using CGI, but if I flip my shot, you can recognize the trees in the background. Later in the film, the orcs cut down trees to serve Saruman's needs. These scenes were also filmed in the park. Of course, no park trees were actually cut down. The film crew brought in trees from elsewhere and planted them in the ground in such a way that they could be easily uprooted on camera. The next scene takes us to the gardens of Isengard, where Saruman and Gandalf discuss the ring. This scene was filmed just 100 meters from the first one. You were in the middle of the park. Now head this way. This is where the two wizards are seen walking. A few trees were added to bring more color, but some of the original trees are still easily recognizable. The mountains you see behind the garden here are the ones used for every Isengard shot. To see these mountains, you'll need to visit one of the most beautiful regions of New Zealand, paradise. I recommend taking this road for the best view. Make sure you have a good car, as the roads are unpaved. Here, you can recognize Mount Earnslaw along with the surrounding valley. This is the same one visible in several scenes. In the scene where Gandalf arrives at Isengard, it's the same valley and mountain in the background. As for the scenes inside Saruman's tower, they were filmed in a studio. For the wide and close-up shots of Isengard and its tower, models were used. The next filming location is where Frodo and Sam head towards the prancing pony. Along the way, they meet Pippin and Merry, then tumble down a hill. They land on a dark road where they come face to face with one of the Nazgûl who is tracking them. These scenes were filmed on the North Island in Wellington in a park near Mount Victoria. Park here and head down this way. The locations are easy to find, as the park is in the city center and there are always people around, with signs indicating the filming sites. The first filming location is the scene where they tumble down the hill. This was filmed right here, and the trees are still easily recognizable. After this scene, take a few steps back. We'll head to the spot where Frodo shouts, "Get off the road." This is where the hobbits get back up after falling. You can clearly recognize the tree right behind me, where Frodo stands and looks at the road with a frightened expression. We finally arrive at the iconic scene where the hobbits hide under the root of a tree after hearing a rider approach. This scene was filmed just below the previous location. The tree root the hobbits hide under was artificial and no longer exists, as it was placed there specifically for the scene. However, you can still recognize the tree trunk in the background. The next scene takes place earlier in the film, but I wanted to show it to you now because the tree where Frodo is sitting is also in this park. It's only 50 meters from the scene I just showed you. After the first scenes, head a bit further down. You can see the tree trunk right here that I mentioned from the scene where the hobbits hide. Take this path, and on your left, a small trail leads down. This is the tree where Frodo was sitting for that scene. Frodo was right here, and Sam was cooking just over there. For the next scene, head back up to the path and go further down in this direction. Once you've gone down, you'll notice this large tree trunk. Walk a little further and then turn around. This is the view Frodo has when he looks at the path. They've added some fences since then, but the trunk is still easily recognizable. After meeting the hobbits at the Prancing Pony, Aragorn leads them to Rivendell, passing through Weathertop. This scene was filmed in the northern part of the North Island, in a sparsely populated region. Weathertop is located on private land, so the only way to visit is by getting permission from the landowners. Unfortunately, the owners weren't there, but the people renting their house allowed us to get closer to the site. I was able to send up my drone to capture some closer shots. Apart from the scene where Aragorn walks toward Weathertop, no other scenes were filmed here. The ones where they are on top were shot in a studio. That doesn't take away from the beauty of the location, though. This remote region is definitely worth the visit if you have the time. After Frodo is stabbed by one of the Nazgûl at Weathertop, Arwen surprises Aragorn and the hobbits and decides to take Frodo to Rivendell as quickly as possible to be healed, before she herself is pursued by the Nazgûl. This epic chase was filmed on land not far from the town of Wanaka. I visited the location, but it's private property, so I didn't take any photos or videos. However, I'll still show you the area via Google Earth. Here, you can clearly recognize the trees Arwen races through, with the mountains in the background. This screenshot gives a clear view of how the shape of the mountains in the background is identical. Still on the same land, but from a different angle, another scene where Arwen is being chased by the Nazgûl was filmed. The scene was mirrored, but when you reverse the mountains, the shot becomes recognizable. The next scene takes place at the ford of Bruinen, the enchanted river that sweeps away the Nazgûl. Although I couldn't visit the spot due to time constraints, I'll still show you where it was filmed, as it's a well-known location. It was filmed on the South Island near Queenstown. You can drive to the location, but be cautious. The road is narrow and unpaved, so I recommend using a sturdy vehicle. Apart from the scene where the Nazgûl are on one side of the river and Arwen on the other, the rest of the scene was filmed elsewhere with blue screens, and the Nazgûl were later added as they are swept away by the water. After escaping the Nazgûl with Arwen's help, Frodo finally arrives in Rivendell. Many of the Rivendell scenes you see in the films were shot in Kaitoke Regional Park, located on the North Island near Wellington. Park here, then walk to this spot. Once you're there, follow the map displayed on the information boards, which provide plenty of details about the filming. An outdoor set was built here for many of the film's scenes and later removed after filming. It's difficult to recognize the location now because over 20 years have passed and vegetation has grown, plus CGI was used for the background, with waterfalls added to make the place even more magical. However, the maps on the boards show where various buildings were, including Frodo's room and Elrond's house. Many of the Rivendell scenes were also filmed in a studio, such as the scene of Elrond's council. You can also find the arch where the members of the Fellowship arrive and later depart, with Frodo asking Gandalf whether Mordor is to the left or the right. Of course, this arch is not the original one. It was placed here so fans could feel like they're in Rivendell. It's smaller than the original, but it's positioned in the same spot. There's also this tree, where Orlando Bloom posed as Legolas for promotional photos for the film. I highly recommend visiting and exploring this area. It's truly beautiful. Once the Fellowship of the Ring is formed, they leave Rivendell to journey across Middle-earth to destroy the One Ring. The first scene of this journey was filmed near Wanaka. To get there, you can hike the Rocky Mountain Lake Trail. Here, you can recognize the small hill where the ruins seen in the film are located. In the background, you can spot Rocky Mountain, and further in the distance, the far-off mountain range. I didn't capture the right angle at first because I was searching for the spot, knowing it was in the area, but only realized I had found it when I reviewed the photos and drone footage back home. This is the view from the summit of the hike. You can see the hill with the ruins right here. The area is stunning and the hike is quite easy. I highly recommend visiting. I'll be using Google Earth to show you the next spots because they're only accessible by helicopter, and no tour can take you there. In the following shot, we see the Fellowship walking across mountainous plains. This shot was filmed in Fiordland National Park, in the mountains surrounding Lake Manapuri, just across from the town of Manapuri. Right here. It was flipped for the movie, but if I flip mine, you can spot the same scattered bushes and the hill in the background. I've placed a marker to show exactly where the Fellowship is in my frame. Now, if I skip forward a few seconds in the film, we start to see the mountains appear in the distance. By comparing it to my shot, you'll be able to recognize several of the peaks. To help with identification, we can also focus on the right-hand side. If I zoom in here, you'll immediately notice the distinctive shape of these small water pools. In the next shot, we continue to follow the Fellowship through the mountains. It was filmed on the same mountain as the previous one. This time, it was easier to find the location, as the shot was not flipped for the movie. You need to look for this small hill that I'm showing you. It takes place right here. If I place my shot next to it, you'll recognize the surrounding mountain peaks, the lake below, and the mountain dipping into the water on the bottom left. As we move forward in the film and shift on Google Earth, we can start to identify the mountains looming above the Fellowship. And if I keep moving, we can spot the distant mountains towering over them. Right after, we see the Fellowship taking a break and practicing swordplay before Legolas spots Saruman's spies in the distance. This scene was filmed on the South Island near Mount Olympus. The only way to access this filming location is by helicopter. Helicopters Nelson offers Lord of the Rings tours that include this spot, though I didn't take the tour as it was too expensive for me. After that, the Fellowship then decides to cross the Pass of Caradhras. This is where we see the scene where Frodo stumbles and the ring slips from his neck before being picked up by Boromir. These scenes were filmed in Mount Aspiring National Park near Wanaka. Unfortunately, this location is only accessible by helicopter, and no tours are offered to visit it. From this angle, you can recognize the slope they are walking on and the rocks above them, as well as the mountain slope descending on the left before slightly rising again, marked by the yellow arrow. Now, if I align myself here and zoom in towards the red cross, you can recognize the scene where Frodo slips in the snow, dropping the ring behind him. In the background, you can distinctly see Mount Aspiring, the iconic peak of this region in New Zealand. By taking another angle and zooming in slightly, you can identify the scene where Aragorn helps Frodo to his feet, just before Boromir picks the ring up. The mountains on the horizon, along with the small rocky peaks in front of them, are easily recognizable. The U shape carved into the mountain on the left, which I highlight with a yellow arrow, is also visible. If I position myself in the opposite direction and zoom in again, we can recognize the scene where Aragorn is wary of Boromir's reaction. The mountains in the background are clearly visible, along with the depression at the bottom of the screen, which I indicate with a pink arrow. After the Fellowship is forced to venture into Moria and loses Gandalf to the Balrog, they emerge on the mountain slopes. They take a moment to rest and mourn Gandalf before setting off again as quickly as possible to avoid being pursued by orcs. These mountains are located on the South Island, near Mount Owen, and you can reach them via a hiking trail. The hike is 24 kilometers long, and towards the end, you'll need to go a bit off-trail to reach the exact filming location, which is situated lower than the official endpoint marked by hiking apps. Once at the summit, you'll be rewarded with a stunning view. I wasn't able to do the hike due to time constraints, but I'm sharing a photo from a friend who did. However, you can clearly recognize the rocks here. And the peak of this mountain, right here. Here's another shot, with Aragorn in the foreground. You can recognize this rock here and that one over there. As for Aragorn, he was likely standing somewhere around here. As for the scene where the Fellowship descends, it was actually reversed in the film. If you flip it and position it like this, you can clearly identify the mountain peak in the background as well as these rocks on the left. If you prefer not to hike, since it's quite a challenging trek, you can also visit via Helicopters Nelson, which offers tours to Mount Owen. I didn't take this tour either, for the same reasons as the previous one I mentioned earlier. The next scene shows Aragorn and the Fellowship running near a lake. This lake is Lake Alta, located just outside of Queenstown. Park here and then walk to the lake. It is only a 30 minutes hike. It's right here, in this small body of water, where Aragorn is seen running. We even recreated the scene. I tried to pull an Aragorn and ran into the lake. I ended up with soaking wet shoes and freezing toes. It was totally worth it though. Aragorn gazes into the distance, catching sight of the Lothlorien forest, the Fellowship's next destination. While the foreground was filmed on location, the background was created using CGI. The lake is absolutely stunning. We visited at the end of November when there was still plenty of snow and the lake was frozen. The Fellowship now makes its way into the woods of Lothlorien, where they meet Haldir, who will lead them to Galadriel. These scenes were filmed in the Paradise region, where I've already taken you to see the Isengard locations. Before heading there, just make sure to have a good car, as all the roads are gravel. Finding the exact filming spots here is tricky, if not impossible, as more than 20 years have passed and the vegetation has changed significantly. This is also the region where the battle scenes against Uruk-hai and Boromir's death at the end of the first movie were filmed. However, like the scenes where the Fellowship enters the woods of Lothlorien, the exact locations are impossible to find. They also added large artificial tree trunks for the Lothlorien scenes, which makes identifying the precise locations even more difficult. That said, I highly recommend visiting this region, which truly lives up to its name. It's a paradise. During my travels through New Zealand, it became one of my favorite places. The following scenes, where Haldir leads the Fellowship to meet Galadriel, were filmed in a studio. However, the boat departure scenes were filmed on private property on the North Island, near Wellington. The property has a small lake, which was used for these scenes. Right here. They also filmed the opening of the Return of the King here, where Smeagol kills his cousin, though I'll go into more detail on that scene in my third video dedicated to the final film. This location was once open for visits, but unfortunately, since COVID, the owners have stopped allowing visitors. After leaving Lothlorien, the Fellowship travels down the River Anduin, passing through breathtaking landscapes, winding through canyons, gliding past towering mountains, and eventually coming upon the monumental Argonath statues. In reality, this river was filmed across several different rivers throughout New Zealand. For the first shot, we head to the North Island. This location is around 3 hours away from Wellington and 1 hour away from the Tongariro National Park, which is where we traveled from. The river featured in this scene is actually the Rangitike River. The shot was filmed right here at this intersection. Here's how it looks from a drone's perspective. You can clearly recognize the shape of the river bend, as well as the distinctive rock in the background. The only difference is that the river had much less water during my visit compared to how it appears in the movie. The second shot was filmed just next to the first one. So, the first shot was here, and now we move just over there. You can park here if you want to get a good view of the canyon. It was filmed right here. Over the years, parts of the facade have collapsed and vegetation has grown, but the canyon's shape is still very recognizable. You can clearly see the canyon bend and the reddish tint on the rock faces. There was also less water here than when they filmed the scene. For both of these filming locations, you can go rafting with a local company that offers special Lord of the Rings tours. Let's move on to the third shot of the Anduin scene. This one was filmed in the South Island, around 10 minutes away from the town of Te Anau. In this location, we see the Waiau River, a perfect spot for canoeing as well. This is how it looks like from a drone's perspective. If you look closely, you can spot some canoers on the river, just like the Fellowship. Now, here's my shot next to the film still. Notice how the mountains in the background match up well. The fourth shot was filmed not far from the one I just showed you, on the same river. In this shot, the Fellowship reaches a bend in the river. This location is a bit further down the river, right here. Here's the filming location from the drone's perspective. This scene was tricky to find because it was flipped for the film. But the pebble beach here and those mountains in the background are recognizable. When I flip the film image and overlay it here, the angle of the shot becomes much clearer. The fifth shot was filmed in the same location as shot number 3. However, this time it was shot from the opposite angle and was also flipped in the film. So if I place the shot here and reverse the frame, the shape of the mountain in the background becomes recognizable. The sixth shot was again filmed on the same river, next to Te Anau. It was filmed right here, at the bend of the river on the left. You can clearly recognize the bare cliff face just here. As for the mountains in the background, I'll need to take another photo to show you from the same spot, but focused on the mountains alone, as my drone was too high to capture both the cliff face and the mountains in one shot. In that photo, You can clearly see the same mountain peaks. The seventh and final shot filmed in Te Anau was filmed right here. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the right angle, as I wasn't able to fly my drone any further due to restricted airspace. However, the film shows the view from this side, and you can still recognize this sandbank and the row of trees right here. The eighth shot of the Anduin River scene shows Aragorn and Boromir looking around anxiously. This shot was filmed on the North Island, just north of Wellington. Park here. Then walk to this spot. For reference, here's where I parked my car. From this location, look in this direction. This is where the shot was filmed. The shot featuring Boromir was reversed, but it was filmed at the same spot. You can still recognize the moss on the rock in the background. Placing the film shot here highlights how it matches the surrounding landscape. Here you can clearly see the patch on the rock and the small stone slope in the background. The following shot shows the Fellowship coming upon the Argonath, but just before, they pass through a stunning canyon. This shot takes us back to the South Island, around 20 minutes away from Queenstown, right here on the Kawarau River. Here's an aerial view to better showcase the location. I must say, it's absolutely breathtaking. We'll descend a bit to get the perfect angle. Now, this is where the scene was filmed. By placing the film shot next to this view, you can clearly recognize the surrounding rocks. Following this shot, the Fellowship finally arrives at the base of the Argonath. This shot was also filmed here with the same rocks visible as in the previous shot. The statues were later added using CGI. After passing the Argonath, the Fellowship reaches a lake called Nen Hithoel. At the end of this lake are large waterfalls surrounded by the hills of Amon Hen and Amon Law, where you can spot ruins atop each hill. The Fellowship lands on the lake shores to rest. This scene was filmed on the South Island at Mavor Lake, right here on the map. If you're planning to visit, be aware that the road is gravel. The filming location is just a few steps from the parking lot. If I place the movie shot next to mine, you can clearly recognize the tree in the background. In the following scene, Gimli complains about the journey, and Aragorn tells him he should rest. The tree behind Aragorn is about 50 meters from where they docked. This tree is 5 meters from these large rocks, right here. The branches have grown significantly over the last 20 years, but its shape is still very recognizable. You can also see the same tree in one of the final scenes of the movie when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli begin their hunt for the orcs. It's visible right here. After the Fellowship lands, Frodo climbs Amon Hen, puts on the ring to escape Boromir, and hides. He then removes the ring and tumbles from the ruins. This filming location was shot near Queenstown. Right here. The landscape has changed a lot over the past 20 years, but you can still perfectly recognize the view, with the hill on the lower left and the mountains in the distance. In the next scene, we see Aragorn telling Frodo that he would have followed him to the end. But shortly after, he urges Frodo to flee, as the Uruk-hai found their trail. Frodo then hides behind a tree. To find this tree, we head back to Mavor Lake. The tree is located to the right, around here on a slope, and is fairly easy to find. And here's the tree. If I place the movie shot above my photo, you can clearly see the roots and the slope of the location. Here's another close-up of Frodo, which I also recreated. After hiding, Frodo moves towards the boats. We see him holding the ring in his hand, hesitating whether to leave alone. This scene was filmed right here by the rocks. You can recognize the mark on the mountain to the left and the broken trunk on the right side of the shot. The following close-up of Frodo was filmed at the same spot on the shore. You can spot the two trees just behind Frodo right here. Shortly after, Frodo decides to leave for Mordor alone before Sam catches up with him, and they decide to go together. This scene was filmed in the same location as the previous one. You just have to look towards the opposite shore. You can easily recognize the tree shapes in the background forming a wave-like pattern right here, along with the shadow cast by this row of trees just here. That's it for the Fellowship of the Ring filming locations, but hold on a moment. Before we wrap up, I have a few more destinations to share that you may be interested in, whether you're planning a trip to New Zealand or not. For our first stop, we're heading to Nelson, on the South Island. This is where you'll find the Ringmaker, the jeweler who crafted the One Ring for the films. In fact, the jeweler made around 40 rings, scaled for different scenes and sized for the various characters. The shop is small but really charming, showcasing Aragorn's ring, various One Ring replicas, and even custom-designed rings made from 18-karat gold, just like in the movies. It's a must-visit spot for any Lord of the Rings fan traveling through New Zealand. Our next destination takes us to the North Island, in Wellington, where you'll find the Weta Cave, the shop and museum of Weta Workshop. This place is incredible, and you could easily spend hours exploring it. The shop offers a chance to see costumes and weapons used in The Lord of the Rings and other films Weta has worked on. There's also a museum, though I don't have photos since taking pictures is not allowed during the tour. Inside, you'll see the actual armor worn by Sauron in the film's prologue, along with many more props from the movies. It was an unforgettable experience. Our next destination is just around the corner, Stone Street Studios. This is where The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit films were brought to life. Unfortunately, the studios aren't open for tours, and all the sets used in the movies have been taken down. Still, you can stop by and catch a glimpse of this iconic location. This is where they filmed Elrond's Council, the interior of Bag End, and this shot of the Fellowship, where they altered the background between the first trailer and the final movie, thanks to the magic of blue screen. Our next stop is also nearby, the Wellington Airport. Not to catch a flight, but to marvel at the life-size eagles and Gandalf suspended in the terminal. You can visit this area without boarding a flight. It's amazing to witness these displays. Our next destination is still in Wellington, where we'll visit the iconic Embassy Theatre. This cinema hosted the world premieres of The Lord of the Rings over 20 years ago, and more recently, The Hobbit. The theater is stunning, with small nods to The Lord of the Rings throughout its interior. I highly recommend catching a film here if you get the chance. Now we head further north on the North Island, to Matamata, the town where Hobbiton is located. The town itself is quite charming, and you'll find a Welcome to Hobbiton sign, as well as a tourist office decorated in true Lord of the Rings style, complete with Hobbit doors. You can also find a restaurant themed around Gollum. For our final destination, we head a bit further north to Auckland for another visit to Weta Workshop. Here, you'll find actual costumes from the films, statues of the trolls from The Hobbit, and even Smaug's head. There's also a large store filled with all the souvenirs you could ask for. They offer a guided tour as well, although it focuses more on special effects and other projects rather than The Lord of the Rings. If you're after more Lord of the Rings specific experiences, I think the Weta Cave in Wellington is still your best bet. That's it for our exploration of the first film and its bonus content. In the next video, we'll dive into the world of the second film in the Lord of the Rings series, The Two Towers. I'm really excited to show you some filming locations that I have not yet seen in other videos or on the internet. I think these spots are one of the most iconic ones and will enrich your experience of the films. To give you a sneak peek, here's a little preview of the stunning filming locations we'll be exploring together in this second video. Each site has its own story, and I can't wait to share them with you. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel because it means a lot to me. This kind of video takes a lot of time to create, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on this incredible adventure. And please tag me on Instagram if you visit the filming locations. I'd love to see it. I've also created an interactive Google Maps with all the locations I've talked about in this video, which you will find linked in the description and in my Instagram bio. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you very soon for the next part.